Park Lee.
The name alone sends ripples through Seoul's underground networks and legitimate business circles alike. Born into one of Korea's most notorious organized crime families, he'd spent his entire life learning the delicate art of balancing power, fear, and respect. I want you to hit the subscribe button if you're new here and ready for this interesting story. By 32, he transformed his family's shadowy empire into something that walked the razor's edge between legality and the underworld, a conglomerate that controlled luxury hotels, high-end real estate, exclusive nightclubs, and technology firms that asked no questions about their clientele. His empire, the Park Syndicate, operated with ruthless efficiency. On paper, everything looked pristine, corporate documents filed perfectly, taxes paid on time, charitable donations making headlines. But everyone in Seoul knew the truth. Cross Park Lee, and you didn't just lose your job. You lost everything. Your reputation, your safety, sometimes more. The police knew better than to dig too deep. Politicians owed him favors they could never repay. And business rivals? They either joined him or disappeared from the market entirely, sometimes literally. At the headquarters of Park Consolidated Industries, a gleaming 40-story tower in Gangnam that served as the legitimate face of his operations, employees moved like they were walking on glass. Every footstep echoed. Every whispered conversation could be your last. The building's modern architecture, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces, seemed designed to make you feel exposed, vulnerable, watched. Security cameras tracked every movement. Park Lee's enforcers, dressed in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide their true nature, stationed themselves on every floor. This particular morning, the tension was even thicker than usual. Park Lee had arrived early, and when he arrived early, it meant someone had made a mistake. Someone was about to pay. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit was sharp enough to cut through steel, charcoal gray, with subtle pinstripes that caught the light when he moved. His shoes, handcrafted Italian leather, clicked against the marble floors with a sound that made grown men freeze mid-sentence. His hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place, and his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, scanned every corner of his domain like a predator assessing his territory. He stopped at a junior analyst's desk, picking up a report with 2 fingers like it was contaminated. The young man's face went pale, sweat immediately beading on his forehead. Park Lee's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. 3 calculation errors in a financial projection that was supposed to go to our partners in Busan. 3. Do you know what happens when I look incompetent to the Busan family? Do you understand the consequences of making me look like I can't control my own organization? The analyst bowed so deeply his forehead nearly hit the desk, his voice shaking. Sir, I'm so sorry. I'll fix it immediately, please. You'll fix it? Park Lee set the report down slowly, deliberately. You'll fix the damage to my reputation? You'll fix the impression you've created that I hire careless fools? Tell me, how exactly do you fix that? The man was trembling now, and several other employees had found urgent reasons to be somewhere else. Park Lee let the silence stretch, let the fear marinate, before finally speaking again. You have until end of business today to redo this entire analysis, and then you're reassigned to our Incheon warehouse operations. Indefinitely. Maybe counting inventory will be more your speed. It wasn't a demotion. It was a message. The Incheon warehouse was where people went before they disappeared from the company entirely. Everyone knew it. As Park Lee moved through the corridors, his phone buzzed constantly. Messages from his underbosses, updates on shipments that definitely weren't in any official manifests, coded communications about territorial disputes that needed his attention. He handled it all without breaking stride, his thumbs moving across the screen with practiced efficiency, making decisions that would affect thousands of people and millions of dollars without a second thought. His assistants, 2 sharp-eyed women who'd proven their loyalty through years of keeping their mouths shut about what they saw, followed at exactly 3 paces behind. They knew better than to speak unless spoken to, better than to offer suggestions unless explicitly asked, better than to show any emotion at all. In Park Lee's world, emotion was weakness, and weakness was death. But on this particular morning, As he rounded the corner toward the executive elevator, his perfectly controlled world was about to collide with chaos in the form of a 5'6" Nigerian woman who didn't know who he was and wouldn't have cared if she did. Chioma Peters had been in Seoul for 8 months, and she was already tired of it. She'd come to South Korea on a work visa, drawn by promises of opportunity and adventure, armed with her business degree from the University of Lagos, and enough determination to move mountains. What she'd gotten instead was an internship that was really just glorified servant work at one of the city's largest corporate entities. 24 years old, proud Igbo woman, daughter of a retired army colonel and a schoolteacher who'd raised her to bow to no one, Chioma had expected challenges. She'd prepared for cultural differences, language barriers, maybe some subtle discrimination. What she hadn't prepared for was this: endless coffee runs, document filing that could have been done by a scanner, and being treated like she was invisible by people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in Lagos traffic. Her internship at Park Consolidated Industries was supposed to be her entry into international business. Instead, she spent her days running errands for executives who couldn't be bothered to learn her name, carrying stacks of paperwork from floor to floor like some kind of highly educated pack mule, and smiling through microaggressions that would have gotten someone knocked out back home. This morning was particularly frustrating. She'd been sent to retrieve urgently needed financial documents from the 20th floor and deliver them to the executive boardroom on the 35th floor. The elevator was running slow, half the documents were misfiled, and her supervisor had somehow made it her fault that she couldn't teleport through a building. She was speed walking down the corridor on the 32nd floor, arms wrapped around a stack of folders, so high she had to peer around them to see where she was going. Her braids, long and styled in an intricate pattern that had taken her roommate 3 hours to complete, swung with each quick step. Her blazer, bought on sale but still professional, was already rumpled from the morning's chaos. Excuse me," she muttered, navigating around slower-moving employees who scattered like she was carrying explosives. In a way, she was. These were Parkley's files, and everyone knew you didn't mess with Parkley's files. She turned the corner at full speed, trying to read a text from her supervisor demanding to know why she wasn't there yet, and that's when it happened. The collision. Papers exploded into the air like confetti, folders spinning in different directions, documents scattering across the marble floor in a disaster of epic proportions. Chioma stumbled forward, caught herself on the wall, and looked up to see who the hell had just ruined her entire morning. And that's when she saw him. Park Lee stood there, his expression transforming from mild irritation to cold fury in the span of a heartbeat. His suit, his perfect, expensive suit, had coffee stains down the front. Her coffee, from the cup she'd been balancing on top of the files. The cup that was now empty and rolling sadly across the floor, leaving a trail of caramel macchiato in its wake. The hallway, which had been full of movement and noise just seconds before, went completely silent. It was like someone had hit pause on reality. Employees froze mid-step. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the building itself seemed to hold its breath. Park Lee looked down at his ruined suit, then up at Chioma, then down at the scattered documents that contained sensitive financial information for his legitimate and not-so-legitimate operations. His jaw tightened. A vein pulsed at his temple. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Chioma, still processing the fact that she just crashed into someone, bent down and started gathering papers frantically. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I was rushing and You didn't see me." He said it like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. "You didn't see me walking down my own hallway in my own building?" Something in his tone made her pause. She looked up at him properly for the first time, really looked at him. Expensive suit, now ruined. Confident posture that screamed authority. And that expression, the kind of expression that said he was used to people cowering before him. And something in Chioma just snapped. Maybe it was the 8 months of being treated like help. Maybe it was the fact that she'd skipped breakfast to get here early and was running on nothing but spite and instant coffee. Maybe it was her father's voice in her head telling her that an Igbo woman bows to no one. Or maybe she was just tired of men who thought the world revolved around them. She stood up slowly, leaving the papers scattered on the floor, and looked him dead in the eye. Actually, you know what? You didn't see me either. This hallway works both ways, and you were walking like you owned the place. The gasps were audible now. Someone's phone clattered to the floor. Park Lee's assistants looked like they'd witnessed a murder. Park Lee's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that he was surprised. No one spoke to him like this. No one. Excuse me? You heard me. Chioma crossed her arms, and somewhere in the back of her mind, the part that wanted to keep her visa status intact was screaming at her to stop talking, but her mouth had other plans. Look, I'm sorry about your suit. I really am. But you came around that corner like you expected the seas to part for you. Maybe if you watched where you were going instead of assuming everyone would just jump out of your way, we wouldn't be in this mess. The silence that followed was deafening. Park Lee stared at her like she was a completely new species he'd never encountered before. His assistants had backed up several steps, probably preparing to call security or medical services, or maybe a priest. Then Park Lee smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just spotted something interesting in the water. Do you know who I am? Chioma looked him up and down, taking in the designer suit, the expensive watch, the aura of power that surrounded him like cologne. Based on how everyone's acting like you're about to start smiting people, I'm guessing you're someone important. Probably some executive who thinks his business card gives him the right to be rude. Another collective gasp. Park Lee's smile widened, showing teeth. I'm Park Lee. I own this building. I own this company. I own every contract that keeps you employed in this country. And right now, I'm trying to decide whether to have you fired or deported. Maybe both. For just a second, fear flickered across Chioma's face. She knew that name. Everyone in Seoul knew that name. But the fear was quickly replaced by something else, something stubborn and proud that refused to back down even when basic survival instincts were screaming at her to apologize and run. Then fire me, she said, lifting her chin. Because I'm not going to stand here and be spoken to like I'm nothing just because you have money and power. Where I come from, respect is earned, not demanded. And strutting around intimidating people half your size doesn't make you powerful. It makes you a bully in expensive clothes. The hallway had gone beyond silent now. It had entered some new realm of quiet where even breathing seemed too loud. Several employees had pulled out their phones, probably texting their coworkers about the intern who'd just committed career suicide. Park Lee took a step closer, and Chioma refused to back up, even though every nerve in her body was telling her to run. They stood there, locked in a staring contest that felt like it could decide the fate of the entire building. You're fired, he said finally, his voice carrying clearly through the hallway. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you can explain to immigration why your work visa is no longer valid. Fine. Chioma shot back, her voice not quite as steady as she wanted but still defiant. I'd rather lose this job than spend another day watching you parade around like you're God's gift to corporate Korea. And for the record, your suit was ugly anyway. The coffee stains are an improvement. She turned on her heel, leaving the scattered papers where they lay, and walked toward the elevator with her head high, even though her hands were shaking and her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Behind her, she could hear the whispers starting, but she didn't look back. Park Lee stood there, staring after her, coffee dripping slowly down his shirt, surrounded by scattered documents and stunned employees. One of his assistants carefully approached. Sir, should we call security? He didn't answer immediately. He was still watching the elevator doors close, still processing what had just happened. In his entire life, no one had ever spoken to him like that. Not business rivals, not police detectives, not even his own father before he died. People either obeyed him or feared him, often both. But this woman, this Nigerian intern whose name he didn't even know, had looked him in the eye and called him a bully, had told him his suit was ugly, had walked away like she'd won. And the strangest part? Part of him, a very small, very confused part, was impressed. Sir, his assistant prompted again. No, he said finally, still staring at the elevator. Let her go. But I want her name, her address, everything. By end of day. Yes, sir. And sir, your 11 o'clock meeting? Park Lee looked down at his ruined suit and smiled, that same dangerous smile. Reschedule it. And get me everything we have on that woman. Everything. As he walked toward his private elevator, his mind was already working. This wasn't over. Not even close. 3 days later, Chioma was ready to leave Korea entirely. She'd packed her bags, cried into her pillow, called her mother, who'd given her a lengthy lecture about pride and pragmatism, and started looking at flights back to Lagos. Her work visa had been terminated, her internship reference was going to be terrible, and she was pretty sure she'd been blacklisted from every major company in Seoul. But then her roommate, a Korean woman named Jiwon who worked in hospitality, mentioned something interesting. The Celestial Grand Hotel, one of Seoul's most prestigious establishments, was hiring ushers for their high-profile events division. It was good pay, didn't require a work visa since it was contract-based, and they were desperate because 2 of their regular staff had quit suddenly. Chioma didn't have many options. Her savings were running low, and she refused to go home defeated. So she put on her best professional smile, updated her resume to remove any mention of Park Consolidated Industries, and showed up for an interview. The hotel was stunning, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, with the kind of quiet elegance that screamed old money. The manager, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, seemed impressed by Chioma's education and her calm demeanor under pressure. She didn't ask about her previous employment ending. She didn't run a background check. She just needed someone who could handle VIP clients with grace and efficiency. Chioma got the job on the spot. For the next week, things were actually good. Better than good. She worked evening events, made decent money, and best of all, no one yelled at her or treated her like she was invisible. She carried champagne flutes, guided guests to their tables, and learned the art of being professionally invisible while still providing perfect service. She was starting to think maybe, just maybe, her luck had finally turned around. Then came the night of the Gangnam Business Leaders Gala. Chioma was in the grand ballroom, making final adjustments to the table settings before guests arrived. The event was a big deal, something about Seoul's top CEOs and business leaders gathering to congratulate each other on being rich and successful. She'd been briefed on proper etiquette, warned about specific VIPs who were attending, and reminded at least 6 times that this was a crucial event for the hotel's reputation. She was adjusting a centerpiece, making sure every flower was perfect when she felt it. That prickle on the back of her neck that told you someone was watching you. She turned slowly, already knowing somehow what she was going to see. Park Lee stood 20 feet away, hands in his pockets, wearing a different but equally expensive suit, this one navy blue with a subtle sheen. And he was smiling, that same dangerous, predatory smile. Well, he said, walking toward her with measured steps, like a cat approaching a mouse. If it isn't Miss Ugly Suit herself. Chioma's stomach dropped. Her first instinct was to run, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. Her second instinct was to throw the centerpiece at his head, but she needed this job. So instead, she did something she rarely did. She tried diplomacy. "Mr. Park," she said with forced professionalism, setting down the vase carefully before she actually did throw it. "This is my workplace now. I'd appreciate it if you could just ignore me and I'll ignore you, and we can both pretend that hallway incident never happened." He laughed, actually laughed, and it was somehow worse than his anger. "Ignore you? Why would I do that? You're the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years. Besides, there's something you should know about this hotel." "Oh no." Chioma felt dread settling in her stomach like a stone. "What?" "I own it." His smile widened as he watched her face fall. "The Celestial Grand, along with 4 other luxury hotels in Seoul, 2 in Busan and 1 in Jeju. All part of my legitimate business portfolio. Which means, technically you work for me. Again." "You're kidding," Chioma whispered, but she could see in his eyes that he absolutely was not kidding. "You have to be kidding. I never kid about business. Or revenge." He pulled out his phone, made a show of looking at something on the screen. "You know, I could have you fired right now. 1 call. But where's the fun in that?" Chioma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What do you want?" "Want? Nothing. I'm just observing. Enjoying the irony. Tell me, do you always have such terrible luck? Or am I special?" "You're something special, all right," Chioma muttered under her breath. "I heard that." He leaned against one of the tables, completely relaxed, like he wasn't currently ruining someone's life. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep this job, because I'm going to allow it. But every single event I attend, and I attend a lot of events at my own hotels, you're going to be assigned to me personally. You're going to bring me drinks, adjust my table settings, fetch whatever I need. And you're going to do it all with a smile. That's sadistic. That's business. He straightened up, adjusting his cufflinks. Oh, and one more thing. Make sure my champagne is always exactly 4 degrees Celsius. Too warm, and I get irritable. Too cold, and I get bored. And trust me, Miss Peters, you don't want me bored. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. He probably knew everything about her by now. I hate you, she said quietly. Good, he replied, still smiling. Hate keeps things interesting. See you in an hour when the gala starts. And Chioma? Try not to spill anything on me this time. This suit cost more than your monthly salary. He walked away, leaving her standing there among the flower arrangements, shaking with frustration and trapped in a nightmare of her own making. For the next 2 weeks, Park Lee made it his personal mission to make Chioma's life miserable. He attended every event, requested her specifically, and found fault with everything she did. The champagne was too warm. The water glass had a fingerprint. The napkin wasn't folded properly. His seat wasn't positioned at the exact angle he preferred. The lighting was bothering him. Could she adjust it? The temperature was wrong. Could she somehow fix the entire hotel's climate control? And every single time, he would lean in close, speak just loud enough for her to hear, and deliver his criticism with that infuriating smile. Are you trying to get fired, Miss Peters? Because you're doing an excellent job of it. Chioma would smile through gritted teeth, fix whatever imaginary problem he'd invented, and retreat to the staff area where she would proceed to have a breakdown. That insufferable, arrogant, self-centered, egotistical son of She would pace back and forth in the storage room, gesturing wildly, venting to the universe, since none of her co-workers dared get close to anything involving Park Lee. Who does he think he is? Just because he has money and power doesn't mean he can treat people like toys. I hope his next suit catches on fire. I hope his precious champagne is always the wrong temperature. I hope. Hope what? She would spin around to find him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, that eternal smirk on his face because of course he'd followed her. Of course he'd heard everything. Oh, for the love of... Don't you have anything better to do than harass your employees? Harass is such a strong word. I prefer strategically motivate. You prefer being a nightmare, is what you prefer. Careful, Miss Peters. You're seconds away from unemployment. Again. This became their routine. He would find new ways to torture her. She would retreat to vent. He would mysteriously appear. They would argue. He would threaten her job. She would tell him exactly what she thought of him. Neither would back down. The hotel staff started taking bets on when she would finally snap and dump something on his head. The head of security had a plan ready for when she inevitably attacked him. The manager had a resignation letter pre-written. But somehow, week after week, Chioma kept her job. And somehow, week after week, Park Lee kept coming back. Then came the day that changed everything. Chioma was in the hotel's back office during a break, scrolling through her phone, when she overheard 2 guests talking about surrogacy agencies. Apparently, there was a clinic in Gangnam that paid extremely well for surrogates, enough to clear debts, save for the future, maybe even enough to get out of Seoul and away from certain nightmarish CEOs. She was 3 months behind on rent. Her mother needed surgery back in Lagos. Her student loans were crushing her. And every day working under Park Lee's thumb was chipping away at her sanity. The idea was insane. Absolutely insane. But Chioma was desperate, and desperate people did desperate things. So, she made an appointment. The Seoul Advanced Fertility Clinic was located in a sleek building in Gangnam, all white walls and soft lighting designed to be calming. Chioma sat in the waiting room, filling out paperwork with shaking hands, second-guessing everything. The compensation figure they'd quoted over the phone was staggering. Enough to solve every financial problem she had. Enough to make the next year of her life actually bearable. All she had to do was carry a baby for 9 months for someone who couldn't do it themselves. She could do that. She was strong. She was healthy. She could do hard things. Miss Peters? A nurse called her name, and Chioma stood up, smoothing down her dress, preparing to discuss the details of becoming a surrogate. The nurse led her down a hallway to a consultation room. The intended father is already here if you'd like to meet him before we proceed. Usually we do this later in the process, but he insisted. Oh, that's fine, I guess. The nurse opened the door to a spacious consultation room with comfortable chairs and a view of the Seoul skyline. And there, sitting in one of those chairs, looking at his phone with casual arrogance, was Park Lee. Chioma froze in the doorway. Her brain simply stopped functioning. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. She was going to wake up any second now. Park Lee looked up, saw her, and his expression transformed from bored indifference to absolute delight. He actually laughed, a genuine laugh that filled the room. No, Chioma said, backing toward the door. No, absolutely not. Not in a million years. I am leaving right now. Miss Peters, the doctor said, appearing from a side door with a warm smile. Please don't leave yet. I understand this must be surprising, but please, just hear the details first. There are no details that could possibly make me want to. The compensation, the doctor interrupted gently, and something in his tone made Chioma pause. He pulled out a piece of paper, wrote a number on it, and slid it across the desk. Chioma looked down. Her eyes widened. Her jaw dropped. The number had a lot of zeros. A truly ridiculous amount of zeros. Enough zeros to change her entire life. She looked up at Park Lee, who was watching her with that infuriating smile, knowing exactly what was going through her head. Well, he said, leaning back in his chair and lacing his fingers together. This just got very interesting, didn't it? Chioma stood there, torn between her pride and her practical need for survival, between wanting to run out of the building and wanting to know more about those zeros. Her mother needed surgery. Her rent was overdue. Her entire life in Seoul was hanging by a thread. And Park Lee sat there, waiting, knowing he'd already won. She started, then stopped. Looked at the number again. Looked at Park Lee. Looked at the door. I hate you so much. I know, he replied, still smiling. Shall we discuss the contract? Somewhere between hate and desperation, between pride and survival, Chioma made a choice. She walked fully into the room, sat down in the chair across from Park Lee, and met his eyes with every ounce of defiance she had left. Let's talk, she said through gritted teeth. And just like that, their war entered a whole new battlefield. If you want to know what happens next in this absolutely insane situation, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when these two are forced to actually work together. Drop a comment telling me whose side you're on, Park Lee or Chioma. Rate the story on a scale of 10, and I'll see you in episode 2 where things get even more complicated. To be continued.